Well, hi guys. It's kind of, sort of, maybe, but not so much our Bible teaching snippet of the day. What I really want to do today is I want to honor a very good, dear, close friend of mine, and her name is Carolyn. Okay, so maybe I'll just call it Carolyn's story or uh, Memories of Carolyn. Uh, Over the past week or so, this has been really something that's been going on every day, and even at night. I'll wake up in the night thinking about things. Holy Spirit has been bringing back to my remembrance wonderful special events that has gone on since I started following Jesus. And, my conversion to being a true disciple or a true follower of Christ was in November of 2006. And for the benefit of the folks that don't know me that well, I've been on Facebook for 4 years or longer. I need to look that date up, by the way. Maybe you don't know, so I'm going to just tell you. I was an agnostic or atheist by the time I was 21, and I lived as an agnostic atheist for around 23 years up until 2006. And I love to tell people, I met the Spirit of Truth. His name is Jesus. I had a one-on-one conversation with him in my mother's hospital room, and he literally flipped my whole life around and changed who I am. Now, I want to explain why I was an agnostic or atheist, and I laughingly say I lived on A Street as an atheist because, I was raised in church to know that there was a God, and I knew about Jesus, but at the same time, it was presented that God's angry and wrathful, and he's going to judge us and punish us, put us in hell for all eternity, but then he loves us enough to kill his own son so he can save us. And he's in control of all things. Watch, this is what really messed me up. He's in complete control of all things, and nothing happens without him doing it or allowing it or ordering it to happen. But at the same time, he's going to judge us for everything that we do, for every event, when he's the one that's in charge of everything. And it really was just a big twisted ball of mix-up for me. And I saw God as a really twisted, narcissistic, angry psychopath. And I opted to believe that there must not really be a God if that's who people say he is. So in a way, I just couldn't see a good, loving God being what the church taught about him. So I'm like, okay, this isn't real. So let's fast forward, though. I want to talk to you about my friend Carolyn, okay? Because this has been on my heart yesterday and today. But the Lord has been just talking to me about all these different miracles and signs and wonders. And even when I was a baby Christian, if you want to call it that, starting as far back in 2007, he has done some miraculous things in my life and through me in my life for other people. And he's done stuff that I don't even know about that I was doing on autopilot, not thinking about it because he was just working through me, right? But I want to talk to you about my Carolyn. Carolyn was she came to work for me at my Crystal restaurant. And I opened my first restaurant in 1994. And so I hired Carolyn sometimes around 96, I believe, 1996. And she came to me through a fairly new program called Work Release. Carolyn had gotten in trouble. Yes, she's a good Christian lady, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this out. She was a black lady. She was a really dark-skinned black lady, and she had gotten in trouble and was in jail serving about a year and a half, maybe 2 years of time, okay? And she was one of the folks that I hired on the work release program. And the whole idea, and I was one of the very first businesses in Shelby County to participate in this rehabilitation, getting folks who are going to immerse themselves back into society. We wanted to give them a job and get them, and when part of the money that they made working for me went into a savings account, so when they got out, they'd have a little bit of money, and it was just a really good program. So, and I will say this, I don't have a problem admitting this out on Facebook and YouTube. I went the extra mile with the folks that were trying to get their lives put back together after making a bad decision or error in their life. I would actually loan them money once they worked for me and they got released from the work program. I would loan them, say, $300, $500 or whatever it was to pay down for their rent deposit or their first month's rent, or to do a deposit. Many of them had a relative they would live with at first, but they needed a vehicle to get back and forth to work, so I would loan them the money. And all I did was let them pay me back like $25 a week, no interest or anything, till they got me paid back, and that way they could get what they needed immediately. So anyway, and I did that with my friend Carolyn, by the way. But and I call her my friend. Did you notice that? But Carolyn came to me, and this is way back now. I want to make sure you understand this, guys, okay? This was back in 1996 or so. I had this group of elderly white people coming into one of my restaurants. And yes, they were prejudiced, very much so. They were prejudiced against me. I mean, I was a single white woman in business by myself, and they had a problem with that. They thought I needed to have a husband and a man there and all of that. So it goes a lot deeper than just skin color, okay? It starts up here. So when Carolyn came to work for me, and I moved her out of the back of the kitchen, okay, to the front counter to be a cashier. 3 or 4 of the men in this elderly group that would come every morning into my restaurant, and it's anywhere from 25 to 30 of them every day pretty much, except Sunday, and then it was only about half of them. They came to me and told me that all of them was going to stop coming to my restaurant to eat breakfast or lunch, and they would not walk back into my restaurant if I left that N-word on my front counter. Well, that offended me, by the way. Number one, I didn't appreciate them using that terminology about Miss Carolyn, because I had on her name tag Miss Carolyn. Carolyn was 7 or 8 years older than me, and I wanted everybody in that building to respect her. I had a 89-year-old woman working for me as well, and her name was Miss Clara, and everybody had to be respectful to each other. That was one of the golden rules in my restaurant, okay? So anyway, I told these 3 old fellas, and I was not a Christian back then, and I used some pretty foul language to describe these fellas at one time. So I told these men, I said, well, I tell you what, since you want to run my restaurant, you want to tell me what station radio I can play, how high the volume can be, what the air can set on, and who can be my front cashiers. Y'all should pool your money together and buy this restaurant, and then you can run it any way you see fit. And there was probably some cuss words mixed in with that. And they kind of looked at each other, and they were kind of, arrogant and bossy. And one of them looked at me. He said, well, that wouldn't take very much, because it couldn't have cost much to open this place. And I smiled and I said, you're absolutely right. The 3 of y'all probably have that much money between y'all. It's only about $1.4 million, so why don't y'all figure that out and just buy me out? And I turned around, walked off, and left them standing there. And their mouth was dropped, because they didn't have any idea that it cost that kind of money to open a franchised business like Wendy's, McDonald's, Crystal, or all of those, right? So anyway, what they would do is I'd have 2 register operators on the front, and one might be white, and then I had Miss Carolyn, right? They refused to go to the register, so they didn't leave, but they wouldn't let her ring up their food. So lo and behold, there was days that I didn't have a cashier but Carolyn up there, and they had to let her take their order unless they wanted to leave. So watch, and they would say things about her, make remarks that she could hear, but she didn't let it get to her. This is the kind of person my friend Carolyn was. I have so much respect for her. She memorized everything that they liked, all 30 of them. And when they would walk in the door, the first thing she'd do is call them by name. Yes, she remembered their names and would say, hey, Mr. Jim, I've got your order already rang up. And he'd walk up and go, really? And she'd say, yes, sir. And she'd read it to him and collect the money. And did you know she completely flipped those guys around to where they would not let anyone else take their breakfast order or lunch order but Miss Carolyn. And they called her Miss Carolyn, not Carolyn. I love the way that she just stayed with it until she converted them to lay down whatever that stinking thinking was they had about her. And watch, so when I promoted her to a manager and moved her off the register, now they're coming to me angry because they want her on the front register taking their orders, and because she was fantastic at her job. But here's what I told her. I said, well, guys, that's not fair to her. She can't make as much money. Well, I ended up promoting Miss Carolyn from a cook to a cashier, to a shift leader, to a shift manager, to a general manager. So here's the part that I want to move over into next. Miss Carolyn became the GM for me at my Cordova location. This is where I want to stop first and give you some backdrop information. I want to tell you how Miss Carolyn ended up doing time, because she's a Christian. She was raised as a Christian. She was a Christian in my restaurant. Even though she knew I was not a believer, she didn't disrespect me or anyone else for that. But Carolyn was in a very, very, very abusive marriage. He had a drug addiction and a gambling addiction. Carolyn had a very good job working for the county school, and she was in the accounting department. He started forcing her to steal money to support his drug and gambling habit. And when Carolyn would not get the money that he demanded, he would do horrendous things to her. And I'm not talking about just beating her and choking her. He would do unspeakable things to this woman. Well, one night, I had been down at the casino with my mother-in-law. Yes, yeah, I was an atheist, so you can go ahead and judge me. I used to go and spend 4 or 5 hours at a little penny slot with my mother-in-law. We would eat the buffet together and spend an hour or so at the table visiting, and then we would sit beside each other at the penny slots and just laugh and talk and have a big time. Well, on my way home around 1 a.m. in the morning, on Wednesdays, I would stop at my restaurant in Bartlett. This before Carolyn became a GM, she was a night manager on late night. And I'd tap on the door and come in and sit down and talk to her for a couple of hours and hang out. And we were just like sisters. I mean, guys, y'all have no idea. She and I were just like this. And it was so funny. The crew people that worked for her when I would leave, they'd be like, we ain't supposed to have nobody up in this building, Miss Carolyn. What are you doing letting that lady up in here? And she would laugh and go, guys, that is the lady that signed your paycheck. She can come in this building anytime she wants to. And they're like, oh, my goodness, that was the owner. So anyway, Carolyn and I used to just talk and talk and talk. And we would laugh about how mean those white men were to her when she first started working for me, and how they were scared to say anything disrespectful to her in front of me because I'd cuss them out and make them leave the restaurant. We just had a big time talking together. One thing Carolyn taught me is that she said, Faye, I want to tell you about, people think that blacks and white are racially prejudiced against each other. She said, let me tell you a secret. And I said, I wish you would. She said, black people are more prejudiced against each other than white people are against us. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, well, there's different skin colors. And I said, okay, yeah, just like everybody, there's lighter-skinned white people and darker-skinned white people. And yeah, she said, well, the lighter-skinned blacks are called high yalas. And she said, and then me, I'm a really, really dark-skinned black lady. They call me like a blue gum with the N-word, and because they see me as being below them and that I'm dumb. If you're a darker skinned black person, you are dumb, and they talk bad to you, they talk down to you, and I said, girl, I never knew that. But look, you know what? I told her some secrets about how white people are too, so it's okay. So she and I fellowship together a lot, if you want to call it that. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you, I'm 14 minutes in, and I'm going to keep going because I want to tell you the story about how my Carolyn got sick and this beautiful thing that came out of mine and her relationship, okay? So let's fast forward to May of 2007. Now, this is after my conversion to being a follower of Christ in November of 2006. My mother passed away in February of 2007. In May of 2007, I get a phone call from our food distributor, and my general manager, the woman over my Cordova Crystal, Miss Carolyn, did not place our food order. So I called the restaurant, and the young man told me, her assistant said, Miss Carolyn passed out on the floor. She got dizzy, and she's sitting here in a chair. I got her on the phone, and I said, "Hey, woman." And she said, "Hey, Faye." And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I think I'm fixing to get up and go home and go to bed. I think I got a sinus infection or something. I was back there double checking the truck order before I had it called in, and I passed out or something. I just got lightheaded." And I said, "Well, will you do me a favor and just stay there till I get there? I'm just right down the road getting gas, and I want to come and lay my eyes on you." And she agreed. She said, "Okay, sure, I'll wait for you." When I got to my restaurant and I saw her, I knew something was really bad, guys, okay? And I asked her, I said, "How do you feel right now?" She says, "Well, I got this really, really bad headache." And I said, "Well, so anything else?" And she said, "Well, yeah, my arm feels kind of tingly, and my shoulder." And I said, "Well, will you move it for me?" She said, "Oh, well, sure, I can move it." And she, quote, moved her arm, and it didn't move. And I said, "Well," and I didn't tell her. I said, "Oh, okay, well, that's good." When she said, "Okay, I can move it," and she thought she did, and I said, "Okay, well, that's good." I said, "You know what I would really like, Carolyn? Would you let me call the the ambulance and take you to the emergency room?" And she said, "Well, no, I really don't want to do that." And I said, "Well, okay, if I take you in my car, we're going to be there for 3 or 4 hours because we'll be a walk-in. But if I call the ambulance, they have to see you first." And I said, "And I promise you, Carolyn, I will stay right with you. I will ride with you and I will stay with you. But would you please let's get you checked out and make sure you're okay?" And she said, "Well, if you think I need to." And I said, "I think you need to." And she said, "Okay." So our young man there, he was an assistant manager. He called the ambulance. And when they got there, I asked if I could ride with them. And they told me no. And when they asked Carolyn to stand up so they could walk her to the gurney in the lobby, she couldn't stand up. See, I knew that she'd had a stroke or something because she thought that because of her arm tingling. So they got her on the gurney, but they wouldn't let me ride in the ambulance, so I promised her. I said, "Baby, I'm going to be behind you." I got to the hospital with her, and Carolyn had a seizure. And I'll try to cut this story down a little bit more. I've got tons and tons of things I could say about my beautiful Carolyn. But when they came back in, I'm there in the little, they carried her to do testing, right, after they got her past the seizure. And I was sitting in the room, and the doctor came in, and they said, "Are you her next of kin?" And I said, "Well, I'm her best friend, and she doesn't have a family here at the hospital, and I'm her employer as well." And they said, "Well, if you're her employer and a close friend, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, we ran tests, and she's got cancer. She's got cancer spots on her, and that's what is causing the pressure for her to pass out and the seizure." So so when Carolyn finds out, she'd had breast cancer 10 years earlier and had a mastectomy, and now it had come back. And so she was not able to work anymore. She was going to be permanently disabled. She applied for disability. So while she was doing that, she got some unemployment. I paid her as if she was working for me and all. So she didn't have an interruption of income. But she told me, she said, "Faye, I don't know what I'm going to do. They won't give me disability, and it's going to be over with before I can get it. It's going to be a year, and I'm not going to live that long." And I said, "Well, you know, Carolyn, I've noticed that you're just not as good of an employee as you used to be, and I've heard rumors that you're burning hamburgers." And she looked at me and said, "I'm burning hamburgers?" I said, "Yeah, I heard that you were really bad about burning hamburgers now." And she laughed, and I said, "And I'm going to have to fire you." And she said, "Well, I guess if I'm burning hamburgers, you need to fire me." So I fired Carolyn, and when I filled out the unemployment paperwork, and I wrote on there that she burned a grill of burgers, and she was fired because she did that. That is considered by the state of Tennessee not a good reason to fire somebody. So Carolyn got all of her unemployment benefits while she was off of work, and her unemployment benefits were good all the way up until after she passed. So now let me go into, after my friend Carolyn passed, I got a phone call from her sister, and her sister told me, she said, "Carolyn told me that she wanted you to speak at her funeral." And she said, now look, I know that sometimes people can't do what others ask them to do, and not everybody can speak publicly, but I have to ask you if you will, because this is what she asked me to do. And I said, if Carolyn asked me to speak at her funeral, I will be there and I will do what my friend has asked me to do. So this gets to be a little bit funny, guys. It's a week between the funeral and the phone call. And my husband's like, well, have you figured out what you're going to say yet? And I'm like, no, I've been praying, and I just don't know what I'm going to. Every time I write down something, I get writer's block. I have no idea what I'm going to say when I get there. So get this. My husband's driving the car. We get to right around the corner from the church, guys, and my husband says, Faye, please tell me that you've been pulling my leg and you really do know what you're going to say when you get up on stage. And I put my hand on his and I said, baby, I don't have a clue what I am going to say. I'm going to trust the Holy Spirit to lead me and put the words in my mouth, because, baby, I have no idea. Every time I pray about it, every time I start trying to write something, I don't know what to say. So get this. So I remember them calling me up on stage, and the gentleman, they had 3 different people speak at Carolyn's funeral. And he says, we have with us today Miss Faye Stiles. This is Carolyn's employer, and she's going to speak some words for our beloved one, Carolyn. So anyway, here we are. They call me on stage. And guys, I have no idea what I'm going to say. So I get up on stage, okay? And I start to talk. And I said, I wanted to come today and talk to you about my friend Carolyn. Your pastor up here said that I was Carolyn's employer. What I want you to know is that I wasn't Carolyn's boss. I wasn't Carolyn's employer. I was Carolyn's friend. And I'm here today because I'm her friend. And I came to honor my friend Carolyn. And beyond that, guys, I talked for a few more minutes, and I still do not know what I said. But I can tell you this. All of the different people that came to her funeral, people that knew me, the mean Faye, prior to me becoming a follower of Jesus in 2006, my employees, I had about 12 of those guys there, and they're coming up to me going, oh my goodness, when I pass along, I want you to speak at my funeral. And I'm like, okay. And they would walk away, and I'd look at my husband, and I'm like going, I have no idea what I said. And he's like, you need to trust me. You knocked it out of the ballpark, girl. And I'm like, okay, because I'm going to have to trust you. And did you know I even had Carolyn's sister and family members and other people in that church come up to me and ask me, do you speak at funerals all the time? So I guess I honored my friend Carolyn. Now, for me to wrap up this long talk about my beautiful friend Carolyn, I want to say this. Did you know after her funeral, it was 2 or 3 days later, I want to think it was 3 days later, one night she came to me in a vision. And I saw her. She was not sick. She was young and beautiful and healthy again, smiling. And she looked at me and she said, Faye, I wanted to thank you for being so good to me. You were better to me than any person in my entire life ever was. And I want to thank you for that. And thank you for loving me. And guys, man, that you see, I can't hardly even talk about that right now because I never realized that. I know that wasn't me having a little dream about her or anything like that. That was literally her talking to me because I had no idea I meant that much to her and that she knew how much I loved her. I loved her so dearly because she was such a beautiful, beautiful person. And little did I know that she had in her heart that I was better to her than any person had ever been in her lifetime. But you know, a week or so later, her sister called me back and she thanked me for talking at Carolyn's funeral. And they call it a homecoming celebration in the black churches. But get what she said. This is so important, and then I got to sign off and wipe my tears away. Her sister said, you know, before Carolyn passed, She told me that you have been better to her than anybody in her whole life. And when her sister said that, I'm just sitting there holding the phone, remembering just a few days earlier, Carolyn coming to me and using those exact same words to tell me how much she loved me and thanked me for loving her so much. Well, listen, guys, I hope that this story didn't bore you, because it certainly didn't bore me, and it surely didn't bore Holy Spirit when he and I were talking about her this morning over coffee. So I'm going to sign off. I got a lot of errands to do, but I love you, and look, I'm headed out, and guess what? I'm going to always be kind. I'm going to go rock some worlds and show them what it looks like to be a Jesus follower, a true follower of Christ. I love you, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Bye-bye.